whatever it is that they're struggling with, like, let me help you set the ground rules. We're not working on weight loss usually in that age. We're teaching them the skills, because most likely will correct itself if they're given the proper tools. And let's not overcomplicate it. But the tools aren't just floating around in thin air. It's not like they're getting a lot of direction from, whether they didn't ask or they asked and they didn't get good direction, whatever the case may be. So I just hope they land in front of me so I can say, no, we can fix this. And it doesn't always end well. It doesn't, like I said, sometimes parents are like taken back by it. I can only assume that when I, maybe wouldn't have a follow-up with them, or they come back like, hey, this is how it's going and this was helpful. But it's a thin line. And as parents, it is hard to in my shoes, at least, say, wow, I really could be doing better in that area, or I really screwed up, because we think we know our kids best. But that doesn't mean you have to be an expert in everything. Asking for help for me is, in an area you don't know, is like doing your kids such a service. So I just wish there was a lot more resources out there that are more reachable and easily accessible. Because I think that's half the battle, is accessibility and resources.
Well, and I'll be honest with you, Tara, that's one of the reasons we do this podcast, is to educate and empower individuals to take charge of their own health. And that's why we had you on today, because we always talk about, there's basically 3 things that you can do to stay healthy. And that's exercise, that's diet, or your diet, not necessarily a diet plan, your nutrition, your diet, and sleep. And of those, most people, and you can share your experience, but when somebody looks at somebody that's in great shape like yourself, wow, Tara, how many hours in the gym do you spend? You must spend 20 hours a week in the gym, right? You get that? It's like, oh, actually, you'd be surprised. As you know, the average powerlifter or bodybuilder, if you want that look, the average bodybuilder spends 5 hours in the gym a week. The most important part, whether it's, I'm an endurance athlete, still the most important part of my weekly training is nutrition. It's more important than the exercises. And it is with most every sport. It's same with the general population. Nutrition is more important than exercise. In fact, this is what I say. You don't have to exercise to live. You have to eat to live. You will die without eating. And then the most important is sleep. Because if we don't sleep, our body is never going to repair, and we'll die without sleep before we'll die without food. Right?
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, and I think that it's not one, you can't be as successful with one without the other, So
True.
For me personally, like you said, 20 hours, it's crazy how people do have this conception of, you must be doing all these things. And while I appreciate the compliment,
right,
I am like, no, I'm not that motivated. But I do have a healthy balance, and I'm proud of that. And years of just putting it in practice. It is a non-negotiable. To me, exercise, what my routine looks like, is a non-negotiable in a very healthy way. Same with nutrition. I have my negotiables and I have my non-negotiables. But sleep is better for me when I have exerted my energy. So, and mentally and physically, right? Not just the physical part. Mentally, I need stimulation. I need puzzles. That's how my brain works. But then fueling for both of those, so that when I am awake, I'm optimal. And again, not getting too complicated. Like, I have 2 toddlers. I'm just as much in the trenches as the next mom. The difference is, I'm very fortunate that I have this skill set, but it's challenges. And going back to what are your non-negotiables? Well, I can't control my kids, but I can control what I do. And that is, I'm going to find a gym with daycare. I'm not going to go to a gym that doesn't have daycare and set up setting myself up for failure, as if the children are going to become second fiddle, when that's typically not the case. So finding whatever that routine looks like in that phase of life. And I use a gym, but that's, fitness just can look so different. And also that extreme mindset of, I can't be successful unless I do X, Y, and Z all at once. I really try and take an approach of, let me meet you where you are, my famous last words. And we will just create a plan, but know that it is going to be a process, because I'm not going to do extreme. It doesn't work. It's been proven time and time again not to work. Now that's not to say that there may be a time period for some people that do better on extreme just until we get the ball rolling, just kind of cold turkey stuff. But ultimately it's adding things in before we take things away, whether it be adding in some exercise, adding in some different foods, or mental activities. Like before I start saying, okay, we need to start reducing the sugar intake, or so that I'm setting them up for, a positive, oh, I get to have things, not take away, can't have. We're adding joy. And yes, it's hard, but I try and make it simple so that it's not like all this abrasive. Now I have to change my entire life. We are going to change your life, but it's going to be slow.
Right. Well, and when you said, first of all, before I forget, we got to have you back on, and we need to talk about not making exercise complicated. And to be a perfect example, because you've got 2 toddlers and you make it happen. And I can tell you, when I was exercising with my kids, it was about when they were turning teenagers. So it was a great time to start having them exercise with me. And it was one of the best things and best times of my life. And I taught them for the rest of their life. I mean, and it's cool. We can get together now and they're adults and we can talk about training and this kind of stuff. But the thing about what you're talking about is don't make it complicated and this is where, people that you and I deal with, the general Americans that we deal with, they're not they're not an athlete that wants to be on stage or whatever that is. So exercise can be very general. I mean, literally, as you know, that exercise can be, the great news is you're doing nothing now. So all you got to do is walk 5 minutes a day. That's all I want you to do. Do that. That's the exercise.
Start simple.
Right. Now, some people would say, I have a twin brother and he's a bodybuilder, and he would say, oh, that's just a waste of time. Not for everybody. For me, walking 5 minutes would be a waste of time. It'd be a complete waste of time. It's not going to do anything to help me reach my fitness goals on my bike or any of those goals. But it's not a waste of time for somebody that's not exercising at all. And that's why you don't need to make it complicated. It's just like, you don't need a gym. You talk about going to the gym, but you don't need a gym. I've got a good friend who is in awesome shape, and he's a health and fitness coach. He's got young kids. He does 10-minute body weight exercises and band exercises at his house all the time by himself. So we should have you on again to talk about how you can implement, exercise into your life and not make it complicated.
Yeah, so, definitely.
Back on nutrition, not making it complicated. If I had to tell somebody one thing that was to not make nutrition complicated, this is what it would be. In general, because, like we said, most people don't know about eating healthy. In general, here's a good clue. And most doctors aren't super good at nutrition. This doctor was, and she taught me this. She says, if it doesn't rot, don't eat it. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that in the whole grand scheme of things, I like that ideology. I also want to premise that for the most part, that's a good general rule. But allowing yourself those simple pleasures of the things that do rot, that are just, the good stuff that you just every once in a while have, is also okay. But it's every once in a while. And I'm going to use this example that we used to teach the kids in the schools, because it was such a great way of like categorizing kind of how foods can fit into, well, let me just tell you, and then it'll make more sense. So if you use the analogy of a stoplight, you have red, yellow, and green. So you have your green foods that you eat all the time, all day, every day. You have your yellow foods that are like every once in a while. And I'm thinking, maybe a few times a month. And then you have your red foods, which we call the whoa foods. And that's like on occasion. So the rotting, if it doesn't rot, those would be your green foods. And then we have some stuff, that's like you have your more processed things because it's convenient, but it's not necessarily unhealthy. It's just processed. So I'm talking things like your your protein powders, your protein drinks, those
I was
aren't.
that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, that's so like
sometimes in a pinch, you have to eat those.
and they have a shelf life, but they
Right.
will rot, right?
They will.
So, but it will take a long time.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
ultimately, I'm thinking like those, or maybe, there's once a week that you're grabbing, like for me, we grab Papa Murphy's pizzas on Tuesday because it's convenient, but we always have it with something, like a salad or something. So then you're not eating as much of it. So there's like different ways of putting this every once in a while. And then you have your rarely on occasion, and that's going to be, um, it looks different for everybody. For me, it's going to be fast food because for me, it affects my gut. And the whole thing with that idea in applying it is that the more frequently you have the healthful balance, the less frequently you'll probably want those other foods. And then they make you feel like crap. And so it's like self sabotage.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't want to do that again for a long time. So
Right.
I think it's it just teaches you how to recognize your kind of what it does to your body and how much different it can make you feel. So in a nutshell, along the same premise as what you're saying, there's definitely a lot of validity to that.